Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most profound, deeply human topics you could possibly imagine. We are exploring the nature of hardship, pain, and the whole human condition, specifically through the lens of the Baha'i teachings. I invite you to just take a slow, deep breath as we walk through this material together. It's a philosophical journey, one that asks us to look at our darkest moments and wonder, is there a hidden light within them?
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do good people suffer? Man, it is a question that carries such immense, universal emotional weight. It's a question that echoes through hospital waiting rooms, through quiet, sleepless nights, and literally throughout human history. Just take a second and let that resonate. Almost every tradition, every philosophy, and every person has wrestled with this seemingly unanswerable dilemma.
Section 1. The core mystery. Well, before we can really understand why hardship happens, we first have to unpack our most basic assumptions. You see, our default human assumption is often to view suffering as a form of divine punishment. We instinctively think, I must have done something wrong to deserve this, right? But the Baha'i view offers a really stark contrast. Here, a person's suffering is not viewed simply as a punishment or some sign of God's displeasure. Instead, hardship is framed as a mechanism for profound spiritual refinement. It's a total perspective shift, moving from seeing pain as a penalty to seeing it as a process.
To illustrate this, the source material points us toward history's most spiritually elevated souls. Think about figures like Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah. These prophets and holy souls endured profound, unimaginable hardship, and they didn't suffer because they were failing or because they were being punished. No, they suffered because they carried the burdens of humanity and sacrificed for the advancement of everyone else. Their lives absolutely prove that pain often accompanies a life that is entirely devoted to truth and service.
Section 2. The Soul's Workshop.
Now, what's really interesting here is that if suffering isn't just some cosmic punishment, well, what is the actual purpose of our existence? To answer that, we have to completely reframe how we view our time here on Earth. A central Baha'i teaching is that the human soul is eternal, which makes this earthly life a temporary stage of development. This world is designed as a workshop for the soul's development, not merely a hotel for our comfort. It's specifically intended to awaken the eternal human soul and help us uncover inner capacities that might otherwise remain completely hidden if we just lived a life of endless ease. Within this workshop, difficulties become the very tools of our development. Think about these spiritual qualities: patience, compassion, courage, forgiveness, detachment. If we reflect on our own lives, our deepest personal challenges are very often the exact fires that forge our greatest virtues. I mean, we rarely learn profound compassion when everything is going perfectly, do we? We learn it when we, or the people we deeply love, are hurting. The Baha'i writings frequently use a really powerful analogy for this process. Hardships act as the necessary pressure that transforms raw material into something beautifully refined. Think of how a diamond is formed deep within the earth. It requires immense, crushing pressure over a long period of time. Without that pressure, it just remains carbon. Spiritual growth, quite often, emerges strictly through this kind of profound difficulty. We can also draw a very direct, practical comparison here. It's just like hitting the gym. Just as physical strength only develops through resistance, you literally have to lift a heavy weight to build muscle, spiritual strength develops through challenges. A person who has navigated the heavy lifting of hardship often develops a much deeper empathy and a vastly expanded capacity to help others who are struggling. It's a real game changer.
Section 3. Choices and Shared Consequences.
And this brilliantly illustrates our next point. So far, we've only looked at the individual, but we need to zoom out because we definitely don't live in a vacuum. The Baha'i teachings emphasize that humanity is entirely interconnected. We live within a shared collective world where the actions and the free will of individuals inevitably ripple outward, bringing consequences to so many others. We are, quite literally, all passengers on the exact same ship. Because we are completely interconnected, an imperfect society creates environmental conditions that cause widespread pain. We're talking about conditions like injustice, prejudice, conflict, greed, and ignorance. These societal plagues create environments of suffering that inevitably impact everyone. That includes both the people who actively cause harm and the completely innocent bystanders who simply happen to live in that shared world.
Section 4. The Mystery of Innocence. This interconnectedness leads us to what is arguably the most difficult, agonizing question of all. Why do children suffer? Why do innocent people experience sudden tragedy? It is absolutely vital to honor the sheer pain of that reality. It is, without a doubt, the most heartbreaking aspect of the human experience. The Baha'i writings acknowledge that from our deeply limited physical perspective, some suffering simply can't be fully understood in the here and now. However, they firmly affirm that divine justice is not confined merely to what we observe on this earth. The eternal soul continues its journey long after death. The assurance here is that God's justice and mercy extend far beyond the brief window of this physical lifetime, balancing the scales in ways we just cannot yet see.
Section 5. From Pain to Purpose.
Now, this is the great pivot of our explainer, where the perspective shifts from analyzing the past to actually taking action for the future. When tragedy strikes, our first instinct is usually to ask, why is this happening to me? But the teachings encourage us to gently shift our questioning. What qualities can this experience develop in me? How can I turn this immense pain into compassion? And how can I use my life to relieve the suffering of others?
Finding meaning in hardship ultimately requires us to move outward. Baha'u'llah's teachings emphasize that true progress for humanity depends on moving away from our self-centered concerns and moving towards service, unity, and the overall betterment of the world. Suffering finds its absolute deepest meaning when it transforms us into instruments of healing for other people.
So, the crucial point is this. From a Baha'i perspective, good people suffer not because God has abandoned them, but because suffering is part of a world where souls develop, human beings have free will, society is imperfect, and spiritual growth often emerges through difficulty. God's purpose isn't merely to create a life of physical comfort for us, but to enable the eternal soul to truly develop. This reframes everything we've looked at today. The deeper question becomes not only why do good people suffer, but also this: how can suffering become a pathway toward greater love, wisdom, and service? I'll leave you with that thought to reflect on today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey.